Welcome to the crypto trading channel. My name is Stu. Guys, Bitcoin is dumping once again. That's right. Once again, the Moon Boys lied to you, saying the parabolic run was starting, and all that sort of noise was once again proven to be the same broken record with the same outcome. Celebrate, and as we get into FOMO at resistance and get rejected, get wrecked, rinse and repeat. Or, of course, if you have been following along in these live streams or in my Telegram channel, then chances are that you've been absolutely crushing this downtrend over the last few months, or at the very least, hopefully avoiding getting absolutely wrecked by listening to the charts in front of us rather than the hopium that's out there on social media. But guys, just taking a look at the 4-hour, we did end up breaking down below this smaller range that I had outlined, but that's not all too unexpected, to be honest. I mean, yeah, there was the possibility that we retested resistance of this little range that we formed, but I've been saying for quite a while now that I really did think that we were going to eventually come back down and retest some of these support levels a little bit lower, just because we never really did come down and retest support of this range. And really, even this little push that we had to the upside at the start of this range, you guys, we never broke any sort of structure with that to the upside, right? We never broke a lower high on the trend, even just the micro trend on the 4-hour, because the closest structure, and I've been saying this for many streams now, the closest structure I can find on the 4-hour is here's where we had our little low, because we got our little bounce there. And this is where we got our next bounce. So that's our lower low. So the highest point between the two is this red line at 77K. And that's where my lower high resistance is on the 4-hour at this time. So at this time, I mean, I still think that we are on our way down to test these support levels. And it really looks like we are well on our way right now. Even just breaking down the microstructure ever since setting this pivot up here. You can see that we have recently, very recently, set this low, lower low. Therefore, we have a confirmed lower high on this micro downtrend sitting at about 66.6K. So unless we end up breaking that, I just have to assume that we are going to be targeting around 62.5K or even lower. Like I said, I think it's absolutely possible that we end up retesting 60K or even lower, right? I mean, there's nothing in the structure showing that there's any sort of bullish rally at hand, other than the fact that we went up a little bit. No structure suggests that the bottom has to be in at this time on anything 4-hour or above. So I still think that it's very possible we end up dropping and testing these support levels. And honestly, I think it's very possible that we end up taking out this low at around 59.9K and actually end up setting a new low, which would obviously be very bad for the structure for Bitcoin. But guys, for those of you who are interested in seeing way more examples of basically how I'm looking at market structure in general, some of my trade setups, strategies, warnings, and so on, much like this absolutely beautiful warning that I threw out yesterday, pointing out the potential resistance. I mapped out where we had our lower high, confirmed lower high on the trend, mapped out the fib range here, and even showed some indicator resistances lining up with that, and absolutely got smashed to the downside from that level. So absolutely love seeing a position like that end up playing out so fast. Absolutely fantastic. And as well today, also I warned about this potential pivot that we had here, and the bears did end up absolutely sending us back down to the range that we formed overnight. So yeah, guys, like I said, absolutely beautiful. So if you want access to that, scan the QR code on the screen, as well as you can also be granted free unlimited algo bot trading as well, due to our exclusive partnership with Prime Automation. So if that is something that interests you, you know what to do. But yeah, guys, taking a look at the 4-hour, let's just see what some of the chart prime indicators are saying. I'll bring up the Oracle Pro. I have not checked this on the 4-hour today yet. But you can see even this little bullish range that I have outlined here, although this isn't an actual STUBER fib, because like I said earlier, we never did break a lower high. But at least if we end up getting some sort of a bounce off these support levels, just notice that this indicator is showing some resistance right at the top of this range. And guys, that's just that's a smaller range, right? That's not even the range including the lower high structure on the 4-hour. So yeah, just basically the way I see it is that the bears are actually just stepping in earlier and earlier. Well, at this point, the fact that we actually got some sideways consolidation is nice, But yeah, just all our confluences, everything's still looking bearish. You know, structure is still bearish on the 4-hour, daily, weekly. Indicators on those time frames also looking bearish. So yeah, there's just a lot of concerns about the market at this point. The weekly, I still think that it's very possible we end up testing significantly lower levels. Now, guys, understand this is not me getting bearish because we've been dumping. I have been calling for 40K as a potential target since October, and actually before the October 10th crash. So I've been talking about that 40K level for no reason other than the fact that it's not that I was saying we had to get down to this level, but just as a typical STUBER fib setup, just in this case, it's on the weekly chart rather than the 5-minute chart. I would be looking for entries around this 786, 886. And unfortunately for the weekly, or fortunately, if you actually see, and here's the thing, guys. People give me a hard time sometimes asking why I'm not bullish on Bitcoin or anything like that. Here's the thing. I am extremely bullish on Bitcoin, on crypto in general for the long term. But being as bullish as I am long term, I am very happy to see us go into these big corrections, these bear markets. And, you know, whether or not this ends up being a full on bear market, I mean, at this point, it's pretty much classified as that. But yeah, just at this point, I mean, I still just think it's very possible that we end up coming down to these levels. And yeah, just I know there's a lot of people now flipping bearish saying this move just started. Don't get me wrong. I don't think the move is over yet. I think we can see lower prices. Honestly, I think the best thing Bitcoin could do would be to absolutely nuke to 40 or even 35K, somewhere in there, just somewhere around the 786. I think that would be the best thing for crypto. It would look very scary. It would feel like it's dead. It would feel like it's going to zero, but at least that would be a typical support level on a macro time frame and a full cycle's worth of price action, right? So I think it would be great to end up playing out the bear market sooner than later and just get it over with, rip that Band-Aid off, right? But obviously we'll have to see what happens. Definitely don't have to hit that level. We could start building structure to the upside, start breaking some lower highs and that sort of thing. But even at this time, you guys looking at the weekly chart, I mean, look where my confirmed lower high is on the trend. It's up around 98K just because of how structure formed. We have our low, we have our lower low, we have our confirmed lower high way up there. So even if we end up seeing crypto get a very strong bounce, that does not mean that we are going parabolic or anything like that. But yeah, guys, as I was saying, a guy like me, I'm willing to accept that Bitcoin could go significantly lower, and that won't scare me. That'll excite me. For one, the volatility getting there, the volatility that would come, you know, when we get there, and just being able to buy things cheaper, right? I know a lot of people, especially in crypto with the, you know, there's a lot of us degenerate traders out there, and just a lot of people want to see the price only go up. So if people are saying that they're bullish, but then as soon as the price ends up getting cut in half, they are nowhere to be seen in this market at all. They were not bullish. They were hopeful, and they had hopium, and they had FOMO. They were not actually bullish. If you're actually bullish, why would you want to pay more for something? A guy like me, you know, I'm excited because if we end up dropping to some of these bear market targets of mine, that just means that I can buy more of it with the same amount of money, right? So as far as I'm looking at it, I would be extremely bullish when we start getting to those macro buy levels. So we'll have to see what happens between now and then. Looking at the shorter time frames, I also mentioned this in my Telegram that, you know, there was this potential STUBER here. Also, we were just basically flirting with the 786 when I posted it. Still hard to say if it's going to play out. We haven't even hit the first target yet. It may not. I was pretty vocal about the fact that I do think that this is a higher risk setup just because we've technically already broken a lower high, a micro lower high on this trend. Because if we had this wick here, we actually had a lower low here that confirmed this as our pivot. And then we had another lower low, which confirmed this as our pivot. This as our lower high, which broke, and that confirmed this as our pivot, right? So we'll have to see. At this point, basically, it's a riskier STUBER just because, yeah, it's just not perfect. It's not like we just had a break where we set a lower low and got an immediate retest. We built some other structure, which did end up getting broken. So I just have my concerns about that. But At least at this point, it's a fairly tight stop if you're laddering into something like this. And basically, if it gets above 65.4K, at that point, I would assume that we're working our way towards my next pivot where I had this resistance outlined at about 66.6K. So basically, if we end up invalidating this smaller range, I would basically be looking for a bigger range pull, something like this, which in that case, resistance would basically be from 66K all the way up to about 67K. So about $1,000 range with a bunch of resistance there potentially. So that's kind of what I'm looking at for smaller ranges as well as inside the bigger range there. Altcoins, very much so the same thing, right? Getting down to our support levels. But the thing is with what I was talking about with Bitcoin, the fact that we had the lower high at 77K, we never did retest any of that resistance, right? If I end up pulling a bearish fib from that level, let me just remove some indicators. You can see that we never did even end up testing the 786. So whereas a lot of altcoins did basically, right? If I bring up Ethereum, you can see, I think in my last stream, I had mapped out a couple of these basically, but we did have that same structure, right? We had our low, our lower low, our confirmed lower high. But notice that when we got our bounce, we did test the STUBER fib pocket. We actually did a couple of times, and they have actually played out a couple of times as well, because the fact that we got this first test, we hit our first target. We got this second test, we actually just recently hit the second target. So, altcoins actually respecting that structure even a little bit better than Bitcoin, but also, that means more volatile moves as well, right? We obviously got a bigger bounce, but we've also had a bigger correction. Actually, let me just check for this bullish fib here. Let's remove the bearish one and notice that Ethereum is very close to that 786. So just like what I was warning about with Bitcoin, now this isn't actually technically a bullish STUBER fib. It's just not exact. Yes, it is potential support, right? I don't want to take that away from it. We are still very close to the 786. It's absolutely possible we set some sort of a higher low here, continue on higher, whatever. It's very possible. It's just that if we would have ended up basically getting this push when we ended up testing that STUBER fib, if we could have actually taken out this level by going a little bit higher, at that point, we would have some bullish structure, at least, for some momentum, basically. It would be just the fib setup would be favoring the bullish side just because there's structure backing up that theory. Whereas right now, we haven't broken a lower high by any means, even on a micro 4-hour range here. So there's just not that structure as added confluence, basically. Solana, literally the exact same thing, right? We ended up, same thing. We have our lower low, went a little bit lower with a lower low, confirming our lower high. We ended up testing that STUBER fib several times right here, as well as right here. And we have obviously hit the first target on both of those setups as well. Hasn't hit the 214 target. I assume we're making our way down there. But it is what it is, basically the exact same structure as Ethereum. Hype, it actually looks significantly different. I still think, and I've mentioned this on my last few streams, that I really think it's possible Hype would end up retesting support. And this one, I would say that this has the bullish structure at least. It's unfortunate that we had, sorry, one sec. Just misclicking things here. We had this high, this higher high, and this confirmed higher low, which we obviously ended up breaking that low recently. So it's unfortunate that the structure isn't perfectly clean. Just the fact that if we would have just broke this basically and come down immediately and then retested that support, it would have been very clean. It's still good in my opinion, because we still obviously have this bullish pivot point here. It's just that it's unfortunate that we have this little bit of bear structure here. So basically the way I'd be looking at Hype right now is we need to go a little bit lower to get to some serious support levels, which for me starts at about $24.40, and basically invalidation all the way down at about $17.80. So a big range there. It's been extremely volatile. So be careful. I'll always check what if you're entering positions, especially on altcoins, but honestly, anything if you're using leverage. Always find out what kind of a percentage loss you're going to be looking at if your trade goes against you, because some of these ranges are significantly bigger than they look. For example, if we just went from the 786 to the 115, I mean, that's almost a 30% move, you guys. So these ranges in this kind of volatility are absolutely huge. But yeah, it's at least nice to see that we do have this structure. We did form this nice bullish pivot here. So if we do end up coming back, I'm hoping to see hype find some support there. It'll largely depend what the rest of the market is doing, in my opinion. But that's one to watch there for sure. I myself, I would rather wait for a 5-minute bullish setup once we end up getting down into that 4-hour support territory. So I don't really, when we have a range that big and my invalidation is 30% away from where I want to start my position, start laddering in, I'd rather just look and basically wait for the lower time frame to add confirmation inside the midterm trend, basically. And guys, if you guys do appreciate my level-headed approach, just looking at charts for what they are, not really getting too excited on either side, you know, I'm not trying to bring you the FOMO. I'm also not trying to bring you the fear, the FUD. I'm just trying to look at the market structure for what it is and approach it with a level head and approach it for what it is. Because, you know, I'd rather trade charts that we currently have in front of us rather than trading charts that I think might end up being there in a couple of months from now, right? That's not how we trade. We trade on what we actually have. So if you do appreciate that, do me a favor, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Let me know in the chat, how are you guys all doing this fantastic day? Hopefully you guys are surviving the volatility. Hopefully you are absolutely crushing the volatility. Hope you're all having a fantastic day. Stu, I get the fib numbers, but my question is, if BTC has to retest the lowest point of the uptrend, wouldn't that be around 15 to 20K? I assume you're talking about the weekly chart here. Yeah, if it was going to retest the actual lows, yes, that would be all the way down closer to 15K. But typically speaking, let me just open up another chart here. So yes, if we ended up coming right back down to the lows of the cycle, that would be around 15K. But in previous market cycles, every market cycle that Bitcoin has had so far, we have found support in that STUBER fib pocket. Each one is actually getting slightly higher. Sorry, we're actually missing this one. Let me put this last one in here. So notice that basically this first market cycle, we ended up pulling back in the bear market to very close to the 886. Let me erase this green line just because it'll be more clear. But notice that wick came very close to the 886 fib there. So it was a beautiful STUBER fib setup there. But then let's look at our next market cycle, right? We end up, and this will look a little distorted with the fibs just because this is on the algorithmic scale. But next cycle, pulling a fib from the bottom to the all-time highs. And notice that we bottomed right in the middle of that fib pocket. Our most recent bear market ended up just below the 786, basically right around that 786. So we're slowly climbing higher in the Fibonacci's with our bear markets. So this one, in my opinion, would make a lot of sense if we had a bear market play out right to the 786 pretty much, which would be right around 40K, actually just slightly lower, but right around 40K. But obviously we could go lower. We could front run it. There's nothing saying we have to go there, but I would expect support to step in with some sort of a higher low for the whole market cycle rather than an actual double bottom or a swing fail, for example. So that's kind of what I'm looking at there. Red moon is coming soon. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. We got the moon analysis coming out. The red moons, the full moons, yeah, they can sometimes they seem to predict market shifts, right? So be careful out there. Can I check the gold chart on the 15-minute and the 1 hour to see if there's a setup? Yeah, I can check out gold real quick. That's one that I haven't looked at for the last couple of days. So nothing has really changed for gold since my last video. I'm going to start on the 4 hour. I will zoom into the 1 hour and the 15-minute for you. But basically the way I'm looking at this is these two white lines that I have. Notice that this one confirmed that we lost our higher low on the parabolic run. And this white line here, we ended up breaking that micro lower high. Right. So basically we have our highs here confirmed as our bearish pivot. Just like when we broke this structure, we confirmed this as our bullish pivot. So at this point, it looks to me like we're going to test the highs rather than the lows first. So I really have a feeling that gold is going to consolidate inside this very large range for a very large time. But I myself, I don't trade gold. I mean, we'll see what happens with that, but just kind of what I'm expecting for how big of a range has formed there, I just would not be too surprised to see us chop around inside this massive range between 4,400 and 5,600. Honestly, we could chop around in there for years, but we'll have to see, right? Because obviously there was a big parabolic momentum run to the upside, so we'll see. But just levels to be cautious of. If I pull a bearish fib for this range, basically our resistance would start around 53.40. And basically all-time highs would be our resistance at 5,600. And then even a swing fail up to, I'm going to call it 57.85, just to give a little bit of wiggle room there, but to get past the 115. So there is potential resistance coming into play. I'm just going to map this out on the 4 hour. Now looking for the potential support of this range, I would do the opposite. Now this one is likely to change, right? If the price ends up climbing any higher, this will change. Same with the other end if we go lower, obviously. Let me just map out where this support would currently be. Something like that, which would be starting around 45.90, and then that swing fail zone goes all the way to about 42.70. So even gold, very volatile lately, but obviously we all know that. But yeah, that's basically the support box that I'd be looking for. That's the resistance box. But like I said, if the price continues to climb, this range will slightly change, right? It'll extend a little bit, but as it stands right now, it's something like this. Now that we've looked at the 4 hour, let's take a look at the 1 hour. Just looking at, I mean, obviously structure's basically the same, right? Actually, this higher low is perfectly the same, just because we had, why do I keep doing that? Have this high, have a higher high. There's our confirmed higher low. So we did lose that. So yeah, those 4 hour levels actually are still very much valid on the 1 hour, in my opinion. If we want to zoom in closer, though, something to watch for is right now, basically at this point, I'm interested in this little pivot right here, just because we had this high and we've closed candle bodies higher here. It does look to me like we're actually going to confirm a higher low, depending how picky you are with that. I actually do include wicks. So even if we ended up turning this into a big bearish hammer, for example, and end up closing below this, I mean, at that point, I would consider it losing that higher low on the trend. But I mean, waiting for candle body closes would obviously be a little bit more compelling. But yeah, it is looking like this wants to end up being confirmed as a higher low on the trend. And obviously we'll see in about 34 minutes. How about I make a yellow one there, just because it is basically loading, right? But yeah, basically if we end up losing that structure, let's say we do something like this, then there's a potential short opportunity for a STUBER, something like that, right? Let's just pretend this is where we end up topping before we end up breaking that structure. We'd be looking at that kind of a retest for a short opportunity. Or how it is right now, I mean, just wanting to play the momentum and keep a nice tight stop loss. I mean, you could enter long and keep a stop nice and tight just below this structure here. But like I was saying, I think this structure down here is just a little bit more important right now until that candle body closes. But yeah, even if you wanted to look at the 15 minutes, so I will do that in a second. But just out of curiosity, I want to make this little 1 hour fib here. Let's take a look at it on the 15-minute, and you can actually see it much more clearly on the 15, right? That's, yeah, it's perfect structure there. So far, oh, sorry, let me just get this guy right here. I'm actually going to move this white one just because on the 15, that is very clean. That's a nice clean higher low right there. So looking for more of a scalp entry on the 15, for example, until we end up losing a higher low, then we could look for a bearish setup. But as it stands right now, since we still have higher highs and confirmed higher lows, basically this would be the support level that I would be watching for, basically 52.30 down to about 52.25. So there's about a $5 pocket there. So actually not even. It's actually just a few bucks. But yeah, that's kind of the STUBER support that I'd be looking for right now if this uptrend is going to continue. It's possible as well that it would end up getting a bit of a fake out, just a swing fail, liquidity grab, whatever you want to call it, where we end up testing down closer to the 115. I personally don't know how well this gets respected in like stocks and commodities and stuff like gold, but I always treat market structure the same. And that's just something that I'd be watching for, that if we just kind of end up coming down here, but reclaiming it very quickly, it's possible we get some sort of a scalp bounce play. But honestly, even with that, it's very possible that you could get a long up to that resistance retest and then look for, even if it's just a head short or whatever, just the fact that we would end up taking that higher low out, I would still have concerns about resistance on the retest. But so far, this is what we're dealt with. This is the structure that we currently have for gold on that little trend. So hopefully that makes sense. Yeah. Anyways, guys, I think that's about all I wanted to go over today. Just wanted to really go over some of the important levels on my radar at this time. So one last time, if you guys do appreciate these market updates, please do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And as a reminder, for those of you interested in joining my private Telegram channel, where I just share a whole bunch of my thoughts on the market, some of my strategies, warnings, setups, and so on, as well as if you want free access to unlimited free algo bot trading through Prime Automation, be sure to scan the QR code or click the link in the description down below. And guys, if you are interested at all in testing out some of those indicators I was talking about with the Oracle Pro, these chart prime indicators, let me just bring them up again. Yeah, I mentioned those, as well as when I was talking about resistance on the lower time frames, which helped me call that beautiful short yesterday. If you do want to give those indicators a test out, use our sign up link and our discount code to receive 35% off on those as well. Absolutely been loving these indicators lately, so getting some real nice calls with those as well. So yeah, like I said, if that's something that interests you and you want 35% off to try it out, use our link, use our promo code. And yeah, with that, I'm out. Stay safe, my friends. Thank you so much for being here with me once again. Peace out.